Hello, good afternoon. My name is Željka Škaričić. I'm director of RAC, located in Split, Croatia. It is one of the components of the Mediterranean Action Plan, United Nations Environment Program, and we have organized this side event together with our sister center, Plan Bleu. I would like to welcome all of you in this meeting room, but also to greet all of those who are listening to us online, listening to hear how our experience on how the scientific research can feed a local action in climate change, but also vice versa on how local knowledge can enrich the scientific knowledge, in particular with regard to what is happening in coastal zones. First of all, a couple of words, why this side event at COP27? Because the ICZM protocol, Mediterranean Protocol on Integrated Coastal Zone Management was quite visionary, even at the period it was negotiated and prepared between 2004 and 2008. The protocol that includes several articles that deal with climate change and requests countries to deal with climate change issues in an equal foot while preparing with other sectoral approaches, while preparing their national ICZM strategies and also coastal plan for specific coastal areas. Today we shall be hearing a couple of interventions. The first one will be made by Professor. The first one will be set the scene with some results of the MedECC work, and then we shall be hearing some concrete examples from several Mediterranean areas. We have three speakers today. The first one will be Professor Piero Lionello. He is professor at the University of Salento in Italy. He's also a member of the steering committee of MedECC, which is a Mediterranean panel of experts on environment and climate change. And then we shall be hearing some concrete examples from my colleague Daria Povh Škugor. She's a senior program officer in RAC. She has a long experience in managing projects all around the Mediterranean, and this last year she specialized on climate change issues. The third presentation will be from our colleague from Plan Bleu, Coline Mias, and she will be presenting. She works also on coastal adaptation to climate change, and she will be presenting the results of their led project, of Plan Bleu-led project, Casadapt, trying to bridge science and policy-making work. So I would like to give the floor now to Professor Lionello to tell us about the situation and trends with regard to climate change in the Mediterranean. Professor Lionello, please.
Thank you very much for the introduction. So I'm going to change about the basic dynamics of and climate evidence for what is happening in the Mediterranean and the coastal zone. Mine will be a very brief summary, highlighting the most important results. It will be based on a series of documents of consensus. A lot of effort has been recently done to express the consensus of scientific community on climate change and related issues in the Mediterranean region. And you can find a lot of information in this sequence of reports. Chapter 13 of IPCC sixth assessment, the cross-chapter paper number 4, fully dedicated to the Mediterranean, and the third Mediterranean assessment report by MedECC. MedECC is also preparing a new report on coastal risks, and my colleague Daria Povh is also part of this effort. It will probably be public in about 1 year from now. So IPCC has detected four key risks affecting Europe. Risks for the people ecosystem from heat stress, risks of losses for agriculture, risks of water scarcity, and risks to people from coastal, riverine, and pluvial floods. Now, if you look the stars, those risks, risks 1 and risk 4, are extremely relevant for the Mediterranean and for its coastal zone. And if you check, there are two important things, that risk of coastal floodings and the risks the delayed risks for the cultural heritage will emerge also with relatively low levels of global warming. And if you compare the marine, it's too far, the marine and the terrestrial ecosystems, you can see that risks for marine ecosystems will emerge and become high with lower global warming levels than for terrestrial ecosystems. So those risks are made large because of the vulnerability of the Mediterranean region and of its coastal zones and marine ecosystems. We have large urban, growing cities, we have large cities, and the amount of urban population living in those coastal cities is increasing, not everywhere, but over many countries. We have a lot of settlements in a macro-tidal environment that are severely affected by sea level rise. We have economy strongly depending on tourism, and we have ecosystems that, as I said, are exposed and vulnerable to global warming. Talking about sea level rise, the first clear message is sea level rise has risen in the 20th century at a pace slightly larger, not much, than the global one. And effects of this change, impacts, are already evident. Now, Venice is a paradigm of that. You can see the effect of floods on the left, and on the right, you see time series of sea level rise with a substantial component due to vertical land motion, and the bars show you the increase of the frequency, the associated increase of frequency of floods. But Venice is not alone, unfortunately, with that. There are many other cultural heritage sites along the Mediterranean coast, and many of them, if you check for the red and orange part of the coastline, are exposed or will be exposed to sea level extremes above 2 meters. Well, the mean sea level is going to increase, no doubt about that. That's the global mean sea level. And the Mediterranean mean sea level will follow that very closely. So as a consequence of that, we have projected different scenarios. You see that difference between scenarios, among scenarios, is not very important if you go at the mid of this century, but it becomes very important at the end of this century, where if we don't mitigate climate change, there are plausible mechanisms leading to an increase of 1.4 meters. So there is a moderate good news, that is, of course, mitigation can effectively reduce sea level rise. But it is the bad news that even if we succeed with mitigation, sea level will continue rising. And on the long perspective, if you go the panel on the right, you can't exclude a rise of sea level of several meters. That's it is in the 23rd century. So this change will really limit the efficiency of present adaptation strategies. Here you have Venice. Now Venice is in the middle of a lagoon. The lagoon is connected to the Adriatic Sea across 3 inlets, and the present systems blocks the flow across these three inlets during the extreme events to prevent the flooding of large part of the city. But there is a limit in the concept of this approach, that if the duration of the closure become too frequent, the system will become ineffective, and there will be severe consequences on activities, the ship traffic, and ecosystems because of the renewal of water in the lagoon. Now, it is very likely that the level that will produce an increase of 2 months on the duration of closures of the lagoon will be reached within this century if mitigation is not successful. And it is likely, or it is can be expected that in any case within this century, also with successful mitigation, we will have to close the lagoon for more than 2 months, but that can even become 6 months without successful mitigation. And well, Venice is a paradigm, but and it is not just because we are in Egypt. The Nile Delta is another area extremely at risk. You can see here how it is exposed now, and how the increase of sea level in the other 3 panels will increase risks for a region that is heavily populated on a very low ground with very important agricultural activities for Egypt. So you can of course adapt, and but of course there is not one approach that will fit all locations and all purposes. You can consider the effectiveness, and you see that if you go to the hard engineeristic defense systems, of course they are very effective, but they have a huge cost, so it is not possible to implement them everywhere, and they are there is the visual risk that they will destroy ecosystems. On the other side, if you look at the other extreme of a different approach, you have nature-based solutions, but nature-based solutions have very often a limited effectiveness, and then there is a conflict with land use. So what you select will be very much depend on the situation and what is the risk that you are facing. Well, it is not just sea level, it's also warming. The Mediterranean has been warming during the 20th century, and this warming has dramatically accelerated in the last few decades. The whole Mediterranean has warmed. The eastern part has warmed much more than the west. And this has also already had an impact. You can see a list of mass mortality events for mussels. Mussels that are an important sector for fisheries for many Mediterranean countries. And of course, warming is going to be much worse. That is as a function of the global warming level, what will be the sea surface temperature in the Mediterranean. And you can see that in practice, the northwestern parts of the Mediterranean, the cooler parts now, will be in the future warmer than what the warmest part of the Mediterranean are now. And you can rule out increase, I'm not talking about heat waves, talking about mean temperatures, increase with respect to present well above 4 degrees. Now, of course, also, as for floodings, you can also adapt to preserve ecosystems, okay? And there are several different options. One is certainly the network of marine protected areas, but then it is also research and improve the sustainability of the way in which you use marine resources. But there is a strong warning here. Adaptation hit hard limits. And hard limits are evident here. I think that's for coral reef, and that's the amount of surviving corals on the left without adaptation and on the right with adaptation. Blue corresponds to a low warming level, 1 degree. So in that case, adaptation will be successful at preserving the coral survival, at ensuring the survival of corals. But if you go for a high emission scenario, high sea surface temperature increase, well, what adaptation can do, it is just to delay the disappearance of corals. Because in any case, if you look at in both the right and the left panel, at the end of a century, there will be no corals left. So the next message it is that you can't just rely on adaptation. You need to have urgent mitigation and adaptation action simultaneously. Mitigation, of course, fossil fuels, stop using fossil fuels to limit the increase of sea level to 40 centimeters. We can't stop that, we can just limit. And to limit the added sea surface temperature increase to 2 degrees. And adaptation to reduce all negative risks that the Mediterranean coastal lines and seas are facing. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Professor Lionello, for your very interesting presentation and introduction to what we shall be hearing afterwards. I just forgot to tell that Professor Lionello is the coordinator of the Special Report on Coastal Risks. Sorry, I forgot to tell that at the beginning, yeah. And now I give the floor to my colleague Daria, who will present some concrete examples of adaptation in coastal zones all around the Mediterranean.
Thank you, Željka. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So I will talk about the coastal plans with a focus on adaptation to climate change. By now we have been listening about the science, and now I will illustrate some cases of action where we provided support to different regional and the local authorities. In the previous session, Lisa De Vignol from the cities rightly said that coastal adaptation is a journey. And actually coastal plan is a plan of the journey. Whenever you go somewhere, you need some kind of the plan. So from that perspective, I will first like to remind you about why we are so passionate about coastal zones. Maybe you know that 40% of the population on this planet lives on the first 100 kilometers next to the sea. And this territory makes only 8% of all inhabitable territories of the world. On the other hand, out of 13,000 of known species of fish, 80% live in the coastal waters. So basically we are all squeezed in this rather small territory, which makes it precious but also fragile for us. In this image that I really like, you can see this golden ring that goes along our coastlines. And these maps produced by our sister center Blue Plan is also showing you the density of population in the narrow coastal zones, while the right map is showing you total renewable water resources per capita. Water is alive. And what we see on this map is this huge difference between south and north. And what we know is that with the climate change, there will be less water when we need it the most, which is in the summer. And it's interesting to know that from our project, which we did in Croatia, which is one of the countries richest by water, now in the summer months, water is already limiting factor for development. So even now, even in the richest regions, the stakes are high. This diagram is showing you the percent of built up per coastal belt in 1 kilometer per coast. And this, we have got this map in collaboration with UNEP Grid in 2017. This was the first time that we got an insight into the size of the built up along our coastlines with the same methodology for all Mediterranean countries. For us, this is why this map is really precious, this diagram. And from this diagram, you can see that some countries like Lebanon are now getting to more than 45% of the built-up, followed by Slovenia, Syria, Israel, and then France, Italy, and Greece. And what is also interesting to know is that the average built-up surfaces in EU are 4%. So we are comparing 4% with 30% of urban build-up. And what we know and what you have rightly heard about from previous presentation from Piero, sea level is rising and this rise is accelerating. On the other hand, from this diagram, you may see the historical data, because the blue line is showing you data from 1975 and the orange is 2015. So as you may see, this urbanization of the narrow coastal belt isn't stopped, and it is not even slowing down in many countries. So we still continue to urbanize these coastal areas, and we have a similar map for 150 meters, which is showing very similar data. So, as Željka previously said, we had protocol. We have also more and more countries who are having a coastal law, which unifies all the issues related to coastal law. So we have some instruments. We do have some of the institutions. But what we actually need is a new vision for a different coast, new narrative, because as you have heard before, the sea level is unstoppable. It is going to rise. With all possible mitigation, we can still expect these 40 centimeters. And by now, we are not so good in mitigating it. The ICZM protocol's Article 18 is inviting countries to prepare national ICZM strategies and coastal plans. So the first coastal plan, which we prepared in the framework of the JEF-MED program from 2014 and 15, was adopted by the county which prepared it, County Šibenik-Knin in Croatia, and later on it was awarded at the ECA conference with the overall MED award in the competition of 28 projects, which actually after this it was followed by the quite strong interest from different regions from Croatia and elsewhere in the Mediterranean. So today we are about we have about now 9 coastal plans based on the protocol, but also many other more which are not prepared by us. As I said, some of these coastal plans are prepared by the largest program that JEF funded in one region by now, which is a MED program currently ongoing, with its 8 child projects, one specified on climate adaptation, and with a total of $43 million. So, as a PAP, RAC and UNEP map, we have been implementing coastal area management programs since the end of the 80s. So all these plans were done in the integrated manner, focused on priorities. In addition to our plans, there are many other coastal plans around the world, as you may see from this table. And as I mentioned, the JEF supported 5 countries in their way to develop these kind of regional coastal plans. So basically, coastal plans, when they are focused on adaptation but prepared in an integrated approach, they aim for climate action, because as we heard before, I would dare to say there is no adaptation without mitigation. There are these several important facts about the coastal plans as we see them. So we are applying integrated coastal zone management and ecosystem approach. We are using systemic and holistic approach in order to identify priority issues. Nobody can deal with everything, but that's why this systemic approach is important, to identify priorities and to deal with the priorities in particularly. And the last and the most important one, our plans are prepared in wide partnership of government, academia, civil sector and businesses. They are basically co-developed with all these groups together, stakeholders or actors together. And that's why we can claim that the process of the plan preparation is at least equally important as the plan itself. And I will come back to that later on again. This is our first plan. So here you may see the policies which we dealt in details are the space, as the space is the essential resource in the coastal zone, water, then the coastal resilience of the narrow coastal belt, and finally sustainable economic development. So we are getting into mitigation and into climate action, I would say. In preparing coastal plans, we worked together with our sister center Blue Plan, as Lina mentioned before. So through Climagine, which is a structured approach to participation, we actually managed to get the collaboration with the local stakeholders on the equal ground, because they had their own task, which was to help us to develop this nice diagram, which is like a blood test result of the sustainability of this region. If it's green, it's okay. If it's not green, it's not okay. So this is something that is very, very easy to understand, very communicative, and very liked by the stakeholders who participated in all this process. So through different workshops, we presented them what our experts found on the ground, heard what they have to say, captured their local knowledge, and also changed our ideas based on what we found from the local actors. And finally, we got to this collaboration and engagement. The combining expert and local knowledge was the key of success of this plan, I may say. So why we insist so much on this process is because it actually includes building of confidence and relations. It supports local community and implementation. This is what we care the most. Implementation. Whatever we do, if we don't implement in the end, it's all waste of money, waste of time, waste of human energy. So implementation is the key from the very beginning of our work. Here you may see the images of the two coastal plans which we are now preparing in the framework of MED program. One is in the Montenegro and other one is Tanger Tetuan Al Hoceima. Both these plans are now concluding their diagnostic stage and getting towards designing the plan. Designing the plan is designing the future, and now how to help this happen, how to really create the future. One of the things is innovation, and this is something that is very a breakthrough at this moment, are actually the use of the spatial images. So as I said before, the key resource in coastal zone is space. You have heard the numbers. And the land use is the key indicator of the state of coastal space. So land use for us is the basics. And also we know that land use is the world's second largest contributor to greenhouse gas emissions. So the key issue for mitigation and for adaptation in the coastal zone is its land use and land use change. Thanks to the Sentinel program, we now can say that we have tools, means and ability to monitor coastal urbanization, coastal land take, land cover and land use, and we are now proposing this indicator for all Mediterranean countries to follow, and the first run of this assessment will be done now in this year. So it is like again we are going through the much advanced methodology than the one that we had in 2017, and we are very thrilled about the results, because this may really revolutionize coastal planning and management. You can't manage what you can't count, what you cannot monitor. So this is now an essential tool for us. To talk about few obstacles, this is, I think maybe this is the crucial one, and probably many will agree. So science did their job excellently. MedECC, IPCC, we identified these long-term problems, and we are now really sure it's highly likely that things are happening. Highly confident. On the other hand, we are expecting solutions from policymakers, and policymakers are elected in 4-year cycles. How can we bring solutions? to the issues which are so long-term. And the policymaker who is a pioneer, who is avant-garde of his society, shall the citizens recognize this? Because climate action costs. It's not a new opportunities. This is a cost for our society. So we have to find courageous governments who are able to really lead their local communities. Governance is made of relations among institutions, about processes and customs which define how the power is implemented, ways of taking decisions on public but also of the private interest, and also the way how citizens and actors gives their vote. This is an example from Šibenik Knin plan, and it is really nice example, although part of it is theoretical, I may say, part of it really functions. So we have this vertical and horizontal integration, which is essential. So we have a national level, county level, we have all the dimensions of the sustainability in this county committee for integrated coastal zone management. Climagine helped us to design this. Then we have an administrative committee which is based on the cities and municipalities. So in the session before we heard how important it is to have a supra-municipal coordination, because when you touch coastline in one place, you have a problem downstream or upstream. So it's really important that nobody gets into this alone. And finally, we have advisory board, which is maybe the crucial. Advisory board is founded by the scientists, by the businesses, by the civil society NGOs. And this is the bridge, actually, towards governance. And yesterday we heard about fantastic example from Barcelona, or from Catalonia's government, who are so active in implementing all these measures and really are the pioneers and a good example for the Mediterranean regions. One other problem is the knowledge, and we need to gather this knowledge and make it accessible. One of the examples is this platform, Adriadapt, adriadapt.eu. On this one, you can find the integrated adaptation planning tool, which leads you step by step in preparing the coastal adaptation plan. There are also more than 40 adaptation options, more than 11 case studies, more than 50 videos. I recommend those with the editor's pick. And this is how we make this knowledge available to our local communities. In many countries in Mediterranean, we have very small cities and communities, and they have no power, not even to deal with the daily topics, not to talk about something so complex as this. So we need to find a way how to overcome this threat. And this is also one of the results from the Adriadapt project. It's some ideas on the typical coastal Mediterranean setting. So it's something for brainstorming on all possible adaptation, different adaptation solutions for the coastal zone. And we would like to invite you to join our poster outside, which is presenting this image, and to add your ideas about solutions that may be applied in the coastal zone with the yellow post-it papers that you may find there. Because we need to raise awareness. From science to knowledge to awareness, we need an election body aware that we need to take this kind of bold steps. It's not on policymakers alone to do this job. They will do it when their election body will be aware that they have to do it. So it's on all of us. To end, the governance is a task that exceeds the management structures, and it requires wide social partnership to be successful. That's why the SDG 17 is so important. I would say it's the most important one, because if we get this one right, we will get all the others. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Daria. Always passionate when talking about coastal zones and how to protect them and make them better place for coastal populations. Now, without delay, I would like to give the floor to our colleague from Plan Bleu. Please take the floor and make your presentation of the Casadapt project.
Hello, everyone. Do you hear me well? Okay, so I will begin. So hello, everyone, and dear colleagues, I'm really glad to be presenting today the Casadapt project in such an interesting panel dealing with adaptation and the link between science and policy. So I'm a project manager at Plan Bleu, which is another regional activity center at of the UNEP map system, along with RAC. And so Plan Bleu is positioned as a science policy interface for different projects, as you already know, I think. So it's in charge of the Mediterranean Observatory on environment and sustainable development, but also produces reports on the state of the environment and development of the Mediterranean. It's also in charge of the regional foresight exercise, such as one named MED 2050 that draws different scenarios of the Mediterranean future by 2050. So the project I will present today is actually a local declination of this kind of foresight method that we have, and also has a lot to do with the Climagine method that Daria just mentioned. So it's dedicated to the adaptation to climate change in a very specific area of the Mediterranean coast, a portion of the French Riviera in the south of France, which is named Sophia-Antipolis agglomeration. So the Casadapt project began in January 2022 and was made possible by the financial support of Fondation de France, and also by the prior involvement of local actors of Sophia-Antipolis agglomeration, its public administration and elected representative, and specifically its development council, which is representing private and associative actors of the agglomeration, and who actually paved the way for this project to happen. So it's a collective work, collective also because it's part of the ongoing reflection and network facilitation led by the region Provence-Alpes-Côte d'Azur, and also the work of our main partner, the RAC Sud, that gathers regional experts on environmental and climate change to build a bridge between science and local decision maker. So this prior dynamic is really important and was really essential to begin this collaboration and build a research action project in this coastline, which is really exposed to climate change. So this project consists in interrogating how national and international standards circulates and how they are implemented locally, but also what are the institutional and cognitive obstacles to transformational adaptation. So first steps, which is about the research, it's about analyzing regional and climate change patterns and collectively identify socio-economic issues to better integrate adaptation objectives into public action and local planning. So this ongoing project is really linked to this local planning, which is happening at the same time in this area, and as also is meant to be disseminated and replicated in other parts of the Mediterranean coast, parts that share the same climate fate, if I can say, and socio-economic issues, but also morphological constraints, for example. So what are the standards, the internal standards in terms of adaptation, and where do we stand today? So the IPCC Fifth Assessment Report underlines that the local institution will shape the impact of climate change. So in particular, cities and settlements by the seas are now considered to be on the front line of climate change, that they play a pivotal role to implement the Paris Agreement, to promote sustainable development goals and climate resilient development. many institutions and international programs are now shaped by these principles. Nature-based solutions that we mentioned before are widely promoted, for example, to be a key to associate mitigation and adaptation to climate change. The notion also of strategic withdrawal, of spatial recomposition, but also implementing action like no regret action are really terms that are widely spread now. But it comes after decades of urban planning, promoting urban growth and belief that it's possible to control its environment, to control the floodings and so on. So it's a change of paradigm that is really important to understand in terms of public action and the time it takes and the generations of public administration persons that it takes to implement over kind of politics or policies. So for this project to work, we wanted to identify the different international and national norms that I mentioned before, and really understand the local constraints of social and socio-economic issue of this part of the Mediterranean. So as you can see on the left, there is a map of the South region, so administratively speaking. So if you can see on purple, it's the places where since 1982, more than 40 prefectural decrees were taken to indicate the occurrence of natural disasters. So there is Marseille and its surroundings. And there is also on the right, the coast between Nice and Cannes, where Sofia Antipolis is actually located. So this territory, as we can see, is exposed on many levels. It has known a lot of catastrophes, and it has also this one big problem is that it's very urbanized, as you can see on the picture on the right. So to characterize this vulnerability of the coastal territory, it's really important to identify the different risks, socio-economic issues that the territory is facing, but also urban planning practices that are really key, the key to understand what we can do actually. And also local representation, which are really, really important. So it means you have to combine environmental science and also human science and social sciences. So it's really important to cross these disciplines to be understood, to fully understand and implement new local paradigm in terms of risk mitigation. So in Sofia Antipolis, actually, so we've seen there is a lot of climate risks, flooding, marine submersion, drought, fires, and so on. And there is, as you can also tell, a huge risk of intensification of natural disaster of on the future, but also over the last 20 years. So actually, there is important issues locally, which are linked to the coastline. So there is a highly urbanized coastline. There is very few urbanizations cut off, and also green corridors on the coasts, on this specific coast. So if the key is space, it's really important to interrogate what are the solutions that we can have here. It's a very mountainous hinterland also. So how do you use nature-based solutions, and how do you operate spatial recomposition in this place? It's really open question that needs to be tackled. And it's important to have that in mind. So there is also land value, which is very, very high. And economic resources, as you mentioned also, that are largely depending on the blue economy and the seaside. So it's important question that is now being addressed. They were addressed during the first workshop that we had in the 25th of October, the last 25th of October, during a workshop that was about identifying those socio-economic issues, and that really stress on the element that I just spoke about. And there were also another episode, this summer's drought episode, which can be really interesting because it marked something new, I guess, like nationally and internationally, because this paradigm of how we deal with environment and the climate change is now beginning to happen like on a daily basis. And this summer was really about that also. So this episode also is an outstanding issue, and is about how, like, to elaborate about how do we continue with this business model, with this, how do we deal with tourism and water scarcity, for example, in the region. And for that, and to meet all those constraints, we need imagination. So Daria just spoke about how this plan and this journeys is about also new narratives. And this is exactly what we are trying to do here. It's about highlighting also how could be the new social contract, a local one, and to highlight the local history, to look in the past, to be able also to have this kind of new territorial project, to be able to see that the French Riviera was not always looking at its coast, but also at its mountains, that it was not that developed a few decades ago. It's about also stressing on alternative examples of land use, for example, that was actually made locally, such as beaches, for example, artificially created by winning over the land and not over the sea, and other example and local history practices that we can relate to. So it's really important to stress on this history, to imagine another kind of future. So these participatory approaches, as we say, are really a prerequisite for successful implementation of any plan or strategy. It needs to be integrated and progressive and adaptative also. At the same time that there is a urge to think differently, but we cannot put aside the collaborative work and the process to be able to move forward quickly. So we have to find ways to prioritize and modulate according to the local value system, but also social special constraints. So we are going to move forward with this project by organizing different workshops and imagining also solutions that can be approved based on this local value system and put into perspective with the local planning actually going on. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Coline, for your interesting presentation. Please stay with us because I would like now to ask the audience if somebody likes to ask something to our speakers or to comment something before we close the session. Yes, there is a colleague. Please, Enrique.
Thank you. Oh. Thank you very much. Enrique from MedWaves, sister center of PubRAC. Well, first of all, thank you for the side event. Was very very shocking and good experience in terms of information and also ideas. And in that sense, I wanted to make a question, maybe not maybe to the point that was raised by Daria about the possibility that really, let's say, governments, and in that sense, policymakers who are normally in the government for 4 years, in the case of democracies, would be able to really start to develop the needed measures, of course, with in close collaboration with other stakeholders of civil society. I would like to make a question. I don't know if maybe not to the panelists, but to anybody else that would like to answer. That if we really think that taking into account that we have been talking, discussing, and we still discuss, and we do more and more research on something which is already a huge problem, which is climate change, together with maybe only environmental challenges, it would be a crazy idea to think that there should be some kind of real planet governance. I mean, a planet govern so that in the case of the United Nations, it would not be at the service of the countries, but the other way around. Or I don't know if they are United Nations or another kind of world system as a government, because I think that while we are still organized as governments based on the idea of countries or states, based on individual territories, I think it will be very difficult to really establish measures that will be benefiting all of us as planet, because as territories, of course, there are many differences. So this is a question I'm making myself since some years ago, and I just wanted to make this to the audience. If somebody would have an opinion on that, even though it's a bit crazy question. Thank you.
Well, it is a difficult and sort of crazy question, Enrique, and it was more a comment from your side and suggestion than a question. If somebody would like to add something, please do it. Daria, you want to comment on that?
Yes, yeah, I understand what you are thinking, but what is going on right now gives us no hope that this can be a reality. So we are going backwards instead of forwards. I mean, we now have to deal with again with the world war, nuclear weapon. I mean, I just can't believe the news. So my biggest hopes are really, maybe this is also unfair, but my biggest hopes are in the pressure of the youth, because this is their world. And somehow I think that it must come from bottom up, because it seems it won't come from top down. So it must come from those to whom this world belongs. But this is so unfair to tell them that we expect them to solve what we've done. So in a way, it's a catch-22.
Okay, Daria, Professor Škugor wanted to add something, please, shortly.
Thank you very much. Congratulations to all. I think the discussion we had, particularly from PAPRAC, confirms the need to go for integration, as we were talking for years on that, and also combining a little bit with what it was said by Plan Bleu, is the third part, is reimagining our future. Reimagining, that means that perhaps we turn to the mountains again, but this is something else. The other two things, and here I insist, is that our emphasis should be in mitigation. At the same time we are talking about adaptation. Mitigation is absolutely necessary, although we started emphasizing about the need of adaptation and also about the overall water cycle, source to sea, as part of what we are talking on adaptation. And the other thing is we need also investment on hard infrastructures, which is for sure necessary for some parts of of the puzzle. What is important from this meeting in COP27 is that perhaps Enrique, before having the international governance, as we all wish, the private sector seems to come in because of interest. It seems that we may have mobilization of many more resources going both to adaptation and to mitigation as part of the protection of the natural resources needed for the economy. So here is something that in this COP it is a little bit more clear, emerging. I don't, definitely young people will continue what we have started and they take, let's say, the floor, but we should not overestimate their ability, because it is not only voice and advocacy. It requires also knowledge and experience, and we should not believe that a new generation alone can solve the problems. It is very important that all the intergenerational also link is extremely important to keep the continuity, because I hear more and more rediscovering the wheel, and even the wheel of the 80s. So we need to also to stress that because we have solutions, technical solutions for mitigation, and several, not many, for adaptation. We didn't touch upon the problem of the alien species, which is already so difficult in Greece that entire ecosystems have collapsed. So what adaptation we are talking about?
Yeah. Thank you very much. And but because we are ending the session, I would like to end it with this very positive message brought by Professor Škugor, that there are pledges from private sector, business sector, for what is not anymore an option but a must: adaptation coupled with mitigation. So thank you very much. Thank to all speakers and to all of you for attending this side event. And let's hope for another occasion to meet very soon and to continue our discussion. Thank you very much.